would have been, is that we needed to come back at the committee, at their retreat, and ask for this money that we was asking for. Now, whether the word repetitive was used, I don't see that it would make a real difference if they are not going to do anything before the budget season. Now, I understand what you're saying.
My opinion is that we don't go back. They have been knowing it, they read the paper just like everybody here. I don't know how many times the superintendent has said we need to have 955,000.
700.
They know that.
And I concur, and that's why I made the statement that what we wanted was the answer that y'all just gave us in the end. A full, open comment that you feel like from the meeting that you had, that they were not going to get it. Wouldn't that have been the appropriate answer? That's what we was asking. We did not challenge whether you did what you did. We was challenging what you told us that you received from them and how it came back to us.
Well, I thought I made that clear in my initial statement, that they said that they weren't interested in giving us, they didn't think the board would be interested in giving us money before we came for the retreat.
You did say that later on within that comment, Mr. Peace. But at the same time, that question that Mr. Mills asked was an appropriate question. I concur with it 100%. That still did not answer whether or not what we had asked the liaison committee to ask for had been actually asked and responded back to. My thinking is, I just want it out transparent, open. If they say they're not gonna do something, let it be known publicly, plain. That's the answer that you got back. And then there are 7 members of us who will have that same feedback and will know how we have been responded back to. I don't believe in saving the public from it. I believe in exposing it and bring back exactly what
Well,
you did.
the other side of this is that the two of them did not speak for their board. Their indications were, and the county manager was,
So,
that we needed to wait and do it at their retreat. Now, no, neither one of them got up and said, look, we're not going to do this.
Well,
And I mean, that would be about the bottom line for me. But, I mean, I can understand why 2 members of a board, or a 7-member board, would be reluctant to give a definitive answer to a question.
Yes, sir.
we've gone down this road before with infrastructure requirements. We asked for 26, and we got 15, and I guess in some change. And the 15 was on a promise. So what makes you think, Mr. Peace, that, or Dr. Houlihan, that if we go back to their budget meeting and ask for this 955K that they are well aware that we need, that we're gonna get anything? If we couldn't get it, you know, I was reading something recently where the most fundamental thing for a student to learn is the atmosphere in which they are in, the environment. We couldn't get the money to fix the classrooms and the school buildings for the students. The commissioners know that we have leaking roofs and broken windows and other things. If we couldn't get that, what makes you think, and I would love to hear from either one of you, what makes you think that we're gonna get the money from the commissioners? The superintendent couldn't make the case last year when you went before him, Dr. McLean. So what are we gonna say different?
Well, the first thing, that comes to mind, and I'm not saying that they said this, but we all know it's been out there for years. And that is, of that 955,514 was what we're supposed to be doing to balance the budget. And we put together a plan 3 years ago about how we were going to do it. We have yet to come close to balancing our budget. So we cannot take that off the table. We may feel different, but that's been out there for years. And how you tie in the 514 along with the 955,000, I don't have the answer to that, but it is an issue. And you and I were the only ones, by the way, last year who voted against the budget because we didn't try to balance it. So we're together on some things.
It's kind of hard to balance a budget when we planned something 3 years ago and they still keep taking away every year, it keeps adding. I mean, even if we get to where we're at, we've got 400 more thousand we have to take off this year that we didn't have last year.
And that's because we have decided to do that.
But to get back to my conversation, to answer your question, if we've not officially asked the board for it, I feel like we should. If they deny it, then at least we know they deny it. Then we go back in January and ask again. But that's what I was trying to get at.
And of course, that may be related to whether or not they're gonna have a meeting in December. I don't know. Mr. Mims, she would know that better in general. Do the commissioners meet twice a month?
I don't think it's even once in December.
Yeah, I think so.
So that may be something that we will look into. All right, anything else related to that happy discussion? All right, let's move on. The district audits.
Absolutely, Ms. Beth Day. And I believe we have with us this evening from Anderson, Smith and White, Dale Smith. Very good. Thank you. Please come forward.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As required by law, the Board of Education engages the services of an outside independent auditor to conduct the annual financial audit. For the year ended June 30th, 2018, the board engaged the firm of Anderson, Smith and White. The audit firm has concluded their audit and issued their audit report. Board members, included on board docs is the complete audit report and associated letters. In addition, you also have a response letter from my office regarding the management letter. You also, in your folders, have a hard copy of these documents. They are behind a green piece of paper in the folder, and then you also have a copy of the fresh off the press, the bound audit report. As has been done in the past, last Monday, November 26th, Dale Smith from the audit conducted an exit conference with the executive team, the board chair, and vice chair. Mr. Dale Smith, partner in the firm, is here tonight to present the audit report to the full board for the year ended June 30th, 2018. I will now turn it over to Mr. Dale Smith.
Good evening, board members, Dr. McLean. Hope all y'all are doing well.
Good evening.
I think all of you have a copy of the audit report, and we'll be going over just a few pages out of the report. If there's anything I skipped that you wanted me to cover that I didn't, you can just feel free to speak up, and we'll go over that information. I like to always point out that on page 1 of the report is our financial statement audit opinion letter, and that is a clean, unmodified opinion is what you receive, and that simply means that we feel as though the numbers in the report are reliable and free from any sort of material misstatement, and also presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. If everyone would, let's turn to page 12 of the report, and we'll look at the district's balance sheet as of June 30th, 2018. Page 12. All right, and this schedule shows the balance sheet of all the governmental funds of the district, so it includes everything except child nutrition and child care. We'll look at those on a couple of separate pages in a moment. Looking at the first column, your general fund, up at the top, you can see the district had cash and cash equivalents of $8,555,778 as of 6/30/18, and total assets of $8,577,622. And there in the middle of the page, the district had liabilities of $1,619,760. And your assets minus your liabilities gives you your fund balance at the end of the year, which is the next to last number that you see in that first column, $6,957,760. $1,862,862. And this fund balance represents a decrease from the prior year of $901,000. So the district spent $901,000 of its fund balance in the year ended June 30th, 2018. And has spent down over $2 million of its fund balance over the past 3 years. And as y'all have been discussing, y'all budgeted to spend another $955,770 of fund balance in the current 2018-19 year that you're operating in. Your unassigned fund balance is still at a good level for a district this size. We do recommend that you try to balance future budgets, though, without the use of fund balance. You really need to try to preserve your fund balance. It's important to have cash on hand to meet cash flow needs of the district. And there's federal grants, some of the federal grants y'all have, that money doesn't get dropped effective at the beginning of the year, so sometimes you need your local cash to help you get by until that federal money gets dropped. You have emergency needs that come up. It's been quite a few years, but the state, they have been known to freeze budgets in the springtime of the year, and at that point, you know, a lot of districts fall back on their local money to have to get them by. So, you know, quite a few reasons why you do not want to spend your local fund balance down any further if you can help it. Anyone have any questions on this page before we move on? Okay, let's turn to page 56 and we'll look at the school food service program. Okay, and this schedule shows the revenues and the expenses of this program on a modified hourly basis. And if you look down at the last line that has 3 columns, kind of the middle of the page, you'll see a line that says net change in fund balance. And there in the middle column, that's your actual results for the year. You can see that the program reported an increase in fund balance of $92,726 for the year. And the program has been operating profitably over the past 3 years, not factoring in indirect costs that is paid by the program back to the district. Cash balances in the program have increased from $904,000 to just over $1.1 million during this 3-year period. And overall, the program appears to be operating soundly and is in good financial condition at June 30th, 2018. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, would you address the change in the net position, full accrual?
Full accrual?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, if you want to flip back to page, well, we can just look at this page here, down at the bottom. Okay, you see all those items there in between?
Sure.
Okay, the biggest factor that makes up that difference, that goes from a positive 92,000 down to a negative 128,518.
Right.
If you add up the items, you've got a line there that says net OPEB asset, net pension liability, net OPEB liability, deferred outflows pensions, and deferred inflows pension. Okay. The district in the current year was required to implement, it's called GASB 75. And that required the board, along with every other LEA in the state, along with every other state agency in the state, that is part of the teachers and state employees retirement system, they had to record their pro rata share of the retiree health benefit plan liability. And as part of that implementation, on the full accrual basis, the district has to record expenses of the plan based on how the state auditor calculates expenses. She does her own calculation, and so as part of the audit, y'all only pay into the retirement system what they say to pay in. So on a cash basis, which is what we were looking at a moment ago, the 92.
Right.
On a full accrual basis, which is not cash, we booked a liability and then we decreased your net position. That gets you down to this, basically this $128,000 negative. Basically, the state auditor was saying that the expense of the retiree health plan was more than what y'all actually paid out last year. So it made the expense higher than what was actually recorded. So, but those numbers fluctuate greatly. So it's based on actuarial calculations. So So we would recommend just trying to focus on the fund balance numbers. That's what y'all budget based on, is more of a cash basis.
As long as you brought up Gatsby 75, I have a quick question back on page 12 that I didn't
Okay.
understand.
All right.
And it's probably just my ignorance, but, I'm sorry, page 5. If you look at page 5, on table 1, condensed statement of net position as of June 30th, and in the first column, go down to the bottom, unrestricted net position deficit, $118 million. Can you explain that?
Yeah, if, I tell you, look at, let's go to page 11, actually, and it'll sort of show you what had to be done this past year because of Gatsby 75. And page 11 actually shows the revenues and the expenses on a full accrual basis. So again, we're getting into items that are not cash leaving the district, depreciation, annual leave payouts that you know you have to record compensated absences expense for that. Items that are non-cash. And this Gatsby 75 gets into recording a big liability for these non-cash items. Now look down at the third line from the bottom. You've got a restatement line, note 4. Y'all see that, a negative $111,839,382.
That got my attention.
Yeah, okay. What that amount represents, and again, I go back to the state auditor audits the retiree health plan. And as part of Gatsby 75, y'all had to record your pro rata share of the whole statewide liability. Whole statewide liability is around 35 billion. Okay, your share of that come out to be this 111.8 million.
So what does that mean? Does that mean we owe $111 million?
Well, basically what that means, y'all, right now, y'all pay into the retirement system what the retirement system says y'all should pay in, which is, I think, 18.87% in the current year. That's your cash basis expense, and that kind of going back to what we talked about with child nutrition, that's why there was a difference in the cash and accrual basis. The state auditor, she does a calculation and she factors in all these other variables that can change. Age of participants, estimated future health care costs, cost of inflation. You got these variables that are moving parts. You know, they're a moving target. And she does her expense based on that, okay? And then you have to book the liability based on her calculation. But that does not require the district to pay out more money. It's just you book a liability, you decrease your net position, which is what we did here. We decreased your net position and we increased your liability. No cash left the district. And the reason that liability is so high is that the retiree health plan is basically unfunded. I told you earlier, the liability statewide is around $34 billion. There's only 3% of assets set aside to cover that $34 billion of liability. Whereas the pension plan is well funded. You've probably heard that our state pension plan is one of the most well funded in the whole country. It's funded at 90%. So if you've got, I think the pension plan's got around $75 billion statewide of liability. Well, the district or the state's got 90% of that covered in assets. So back in 2015, the district had to implement Gatsby 68, which required you to record the share of the pension liability. Well, it wasn't as big of a deal because it was so well funded. The unfunded liability was not that significant. But because the healthcare plan is basically unfunded, it made a huge impact on y'all's statements.
So bottom line for us is we're not going to be called to deliver $111 million one day.
No, the way I presented it last week at the Finance Committee meeting was basically that's money that have to be paid out in the future, and you book the liability that's got to be paid out in the future. But if you think about it, where do you get your funding? It comes from the state of North Carolina, the federal government, and the county. We didn't book a receivable on the books to offset that future payout. So as time goes on, you'll get the money in to pay that liability from the state, county, and federal government. Does that make sense?
It certainly.
It really muddies
jumped
up,
out. Yeah,
it muddies
jumped
up your
out.
financial statements. It really does.
It does. It absolutely does.
From you guys, y'all will continue to budget on a modified accrual basis, which is more of a cash basis.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Thank you.
Anything else?
That was pretty much it, except the compliance portion of the audit. There are 3 letters that start back on page 57 of the report that relate to the compliance testing, and all 3 of those letters are clean, unmodified. That basically means that we didn't note any material instances of non-compliance or any material internal control issues. We did report 1 finding that is summarized on page 66, and that finding pertains to a teacher that was teaching out of area. And this is probably the most common finding that we report in our audits across the state. And we did discuss this item in detail with management and a couple of board members last week. And it's our understanding that this issue's been addressed and should not be a problem going forward. And there was also a separate letter that we issued with a couple of procedural recommendations pertaining to purchase orders and the pricing of adult meals. That was a separate 1-page letter that y'all should have gotten dealing with those 2 areas. And again, we talked over those items with management, and it's our understanding that steps have been taken to correct those situations.
Okay, any more questions? Hey, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I thank Ms. Beth today for her help in getting us through the audit this year. It's quite a burden when we come in, and her and her staff, they do a great job of having things ready when we show up. And y'all really have a well-run finance department. Again, we go around to a lot of districts, and y'all's is one of the best that we see.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beth, you're not getting a raise.
You know we can't afford it.
Thank you.
This day, we have the federal fiscal monitoring audit commission rules.
Board members, in addition to the required annual financial audit, periodically outside agencies will conduct monitoring visits. The Federal Fiscal Monitoring Division of DPI, or Department of Public Instruction, contacted us at the end of August that they would be conducting an on-site visit September 4th and 5th of this year, 2018. The information you have in board docs is the report received from the visit, the follow-up required response from my office, and then the closure notification from DPI. Based on the review, we were required to respond regarding our property management system. The Code of Federal Regulations require 11 data elements for all federal property. Our existing management system included 8 of the 11 elements. After the monitoring, we added use, condition of the property, and ultimate disposal data. We were also required to update our property management system internal controls to include these elements. A memo was distributed to all district leadership and administrative assistants on November 6, 2018 with the updated procedures. In addition, we updated time and effort certifications during the review. These certifications were done earlier than required, so our procedures have been revised to prevent this in the future. Overall, I was pleased with the federal monitoring. During the exit interview, the monitor noted that this was a really clean monitoring and that our federal procedures were perfectly healthy. We appreciate the opportunity to improve our processes. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Questions? Thank you very much.
It's now time, Dr. Houlihan, for our academic success component. Dr. Meyer, I turn it over to you. I believe we have 5 additional school improvement plans needing action by our board.
That's correct. Dr. Houlihan and board members, good evening. Last month, as you know, we presented the school improvement plans for the district for the year for each of our schools, and we have 5 schools that were low performing, and those low performing plans went on each school's website along with a feedback form where the community could give feedback to the plans. Well, I'm happy to say that there were no feedback components listed on the feedback plans for the 5 low-performing schools. I did reach out to all the principals on Friday. Some of them did alert me that they are already looking at their action steps in their plans, and they have changed some of their action steps and updated their action steps, which they will continue to do throughout the school year. So at this time, I would ask the board if they would approve the plans of the 5 low-performing schools so that the schools may upload those plans to the state tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a motion that we would approve the 5 offered improvement plans.
Is there a second? Discussion? Anybody have any questions? I do. Explain again the feedback component. What does that mean?
Yes. Because the state, excuse me, because the schools are designated as low-performing, part of the general strategy that goes along with the schools that are low-performing, the community has to have an opportunity to provide feedback on the preliminary plans. What you approved last month for all of our other 15 schools, you approved their actual plan. And for these 5 low-performing schools, it was a preliminary plan. And that plan was a plan that was linked on each school's website, along with the letter stating that the school was low-performing, as well as a link for the community to give feedback to each one of the schools.
And what was the response roughly?
Actually, there were no responses. We had one response on one school's plan, but it was not on the plan. It was about tutoring, which is something that that principal has already has a plan for and is already implemented. And it had, in fact, they said that the plan was great. The only thing they would like to see is tutoring.
Yes, sir.
Then based on what you just said, Dr. Murray, other than that one individual saying, asking a question about tutoring, are we sure that the community is taking a look at this information? I mean, if you, and I would want to know that measurement, because if only one person responded, and I don't know how long they set out on the web, you know, are people paying attention?
Dr. Mark, will you share how we notify the families at each school that this was available to them?
Yes, it's a large button on each school's website. And right there is, the families could click on that website to see the information that's there. And as well as the school reached out to their parents in their school, as well as their school improvement teams when they developed their plans.
Well, generally did, I guess, the principals tell you that they had been getting feedback? People didn't do it on the web, but the principals had received it. I mean, have we gotten any feedback?
Well, I talked to the principals on Friday, and none of them said that they had gotten any outside feedback.
And this was on the web for how long?
It went on after the 30 days. It went on after the November meeting. It went up the Monday following the November meeting.
Is there a reason to put this out there anymore, other than pro forma? I mean, we're jumping through hoops, making this information available and not getting any feedback.
Well,
What is the state deadline?
The state deadline, once the board approves, we have the schools have 5 days to submit it to the state, once the board approves it. 7 days, I'm sorry, to submit it to the state.
Well, Mr. Mims, I think that we're probably too late to do this year, but I think you've made a very good point in the future, and I think it really is important that we make sure that people who can't get on the internet, or who don't use it that well, or who might have English as a second language, make sure that they get the opportunity for some input. So, but obviously this year that's not the case.
If I could toss out something, having served on a school improvement team for 4 years, I think the whole format is just terribly user-unfriendly. And I can understand why there's no feedback from the general public. It's all state-directed boilerplate, and there is some good information there, but you really got to dig for it. I don't know if we can, but I would love to get away from that state format. To me, a school improvement plan should be understandable to the parents. If you have an underperforming school, then your improvement plan should say, we are going to attempt to train our teachers or have more teachers in this particular elective or this, or we're going to look at after-school programs, or we're going to look at a different discipline policy or a different positive reinforcement for good behavior. Something that makes sense, not, metric L62 in some very complex wording that nobody can understand. I couldn't understand it, I was on a dadgum team. So I think we're wasting, and I hate to say this, but in my opinion, and having served on a team for 4 years, I think we're spending a lot of time doing, in our staff, our principals, our teachers, put in a tremendous amount of effort in these plans, and I really don't think we get value added. I think we need to go back to a simple, if you're a principal, and we have mostly good principals, I think we all agree with that, the principal knows what needs to be done. And certainly the assistant principal and the teachers, when they get together, here's our problem, here's what we need to fix. Make it understandable, and then parents will want to read it and understand it. I don't know if we can get away from that.
We're chuckling because the state on this one is tight. Yes, sir.
But to add to what Mr. Rivers just said, really, he had echoed something that I brought up at a previous meeting about the plan as well, that with the language and with their argument being, is really, how can I put it, Plutorian arithmetic to the common person that will read it outside of the school system. And remember, I was asking that question as well, but my thought was, is it a requirement? Is it a state requirement that you have to do it? But then my thinking was, along with what Mr. Rivers just said, is there something that we can break down in simplicity that could be given out, that people could really understand what you're saying in just common layman's terms?
Let's let our attorney respond, gentlemen.
Well, so the school improvement plan obviously is a statutory requirement, and there's a number of elements that have to be in it. Now, the state has created this software system, what's it called?
NC Star.
NC Star, and I think that's where some of the gobbledygook is, if I may be frank.
That's a nice literature.
That was a polite way of saying it.
Yeah, it was.
And, that's what I was actually just looking, I don't think that there is a requirement in the statute that we use their software, but there may be a requirement elsewhere. I've never been asked that before, and I'm happy to look into it. But I will say that there's probably a dozen things in statute that you have to have in your plan. But right, the metric this and that sort of thing, that comes from DPI.
Well,
It is software that-
just to help out our principals and our teachers, they put in a phenomenal amount of time on this, and I think for really very little value added in the community. So, if we can help them out to allow them more time to teach and less time to fill out a form that none of us really understand, would be helpful.
Yes, Mr. James?
Dr. Houlihan and I guess Dr. McLean. So now that we're in essence, we're